Dr. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive building in front of him. The Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences stretched into the purple sky of Zentari Prime like a crystal mountain. Its walls glowed with soft blue light, and strange symbols moved across its surface like living words. Jake had dreamed of this moment for years. He was the first human ever chosen to teach at the most important school in the galaxy. Scientists from dozens of different alien worlds came here to learn and share knowledge. Now he would represent Earth among them. His hands shook slightly as he carried his bags through the main entrance. The hallway was enormous, with a ceiling so high he could barely see it. Creatures he had only seen in textbooks walked past him. A tall being with silver skin and 4 arms glided by without looking at him. Another creature that seemed to be made of living crystal floated past, its body sparkling in the light. Jake felt very small and very human. "Professor Morrison?" A voice called out behind him. Jake turned to see a young woman with dark hair hurrying toward him. She wore the blue uniform of a research assistant. "I'm Zara Kim," she said, slightly out of breath. "I'm your research assistant. I've been waiting for you." Jake smiled with relief. It felt good to see another human face. "Nice to meet you, Zara. I have to admit this place is a bit overwhelming." Zara laughed. "You should see the library. It has books from 300 different worlds. Some of them are made of light, and some sing when you read them." They walked together through the winding hallways. Jake noticed that many of the alien students stared at him as he passed. Some pointed and whispered to their friends. He heard the word human spoken in several different languages, though not all of them used sounds he could recognize. "Are they always this curious about new species?" Jake asked. Zara's expression became more serious. "Well, humans aren't exactly famous here yet. Most of them think Earth is just a small planet with simple life forms. They call us the Dirt World." "Sometimes." Jake felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. "I see. Don't worry," Zara said quickly. "Once they hear your presentation, they'll change their minds. What you've prepared is amazing." They reached Jake's new office, which was surprisingly normal compared to the rest of the building. It had a desk, chairs, and a large window that looked out over the alien city below. Strange flying vehicles moved between tall towers that twisted like DNA helixes. "Your first lecture is tomorrow," Zara said, setting down a tablet on his desk. "The topic you submitted was approved by the department head. Though I have to tell you, some of the students weren't very excited when they heard about it." Jake picked up the tablet and read his own words on the screen. "The remarkable capabilities of terrestrial arthropods." In simple terms, he was going to talk about Earth's insects. "What exactly did they say?" he asked. Zara looked uncomfortable. "Well, one of them laughed and said you must be joking. A few others wondered if humans really had nothing better to study than tiny crawling pests." Jake sat down heavily in his UA chair. He had spent months preparing this presentation. He had chosen insects because he truly believed they were some of the most amazing creatures in the universe, but now he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. "Professor," Zara said, gently, "I've seen your research. I know what you're going to show them. Trust me, they have no idea what's coming." That evening, Jake walked through the student dining hall to get dinner. The room was filled with the strangest collection of beings he had ever seen. At one table, 3 creatures that looked like walking trees shared a meal of glowing fruits. At another, beings made of what appeared to be living metal discussed something in voices that sounded like musical chimes. As Jake carried his tray to an empty table, he heard laughter from nearby. A group of students was talking loudly enough for him to understand their words, thanks to the translation device in his ear. "I heard the human professor thinks insects are worth studying," said a voice that sounded like grinding stone. Jake looked over to see a massive creature with gray skin and 4 arms. This was clearly a Korthan, one of the warrior species he had read about. "Insects," laughed another student, this one tall and thin with too many joints in its arms. "What's next? Will he lecture us about dirt or maybe rocks?" "My world has creatures that can bend space itself," added a third voice. "And this human wants to talk about bugs that crawl in mud." Jake felt his appetite disappear. He picked at his food while the laughter continued behind him. Maybe Zara was wrong. Maybe his presentation really was going to be a disaster. But then, he thought about the hours of footage he had collected. He remembered the first time he had watched a colony of ants work together to solve a problem that would challenge the best human engineers. He thought about bees making decisions as a group that were mathematically perfect. He thought about tiny creatures doing things that seemed impossible. Jake finished his dinner and walked back to his office. He spent the rest of the night reviewing his presentation one more time. Tomorrow, he would stand in front of the smartest beings in the galaxy and try to convince them that Earth's smallest creatures were worth their respect. He just hoped they would listen long enough to see what insects could really do. The next morning came too quickly. Jake stood outside the lecture hall, holding his presentation materials and trying to calm his nerves. Through the door, he could hear dozens of different voices speaking in languages from across the galaxy. Zara appeared beside him. "Ready, Professor?" Jake took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." He opened the door and walked into the room. The lecture hall was enormous, with seats rising up in curved rows like an amphitheater. Every seat was filled with alien students, and all of their eyes, stalks, sensors, and other visual organs turned toward him as he entered. Jake walked to the front of the room and activated the holographic display system. The lights dimmed, and a three-dimensional image of Earth appeared floating above his head. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "My name is Dr. Jake Morrison, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the most remarkable creatures in the known galaxy." The room was quiet, waiting. "Today we're going to discuss the incredible capabilities of terrestrial arthropods. In simpler terms, Earth's insects." The silence broke. Laughter erupted from several parts of the room. Jake saw the gray-skinned Corthan from the dining hall lean back in his seat with obvious amusement. "Insects?" the Corthan called out, his voice booming across the room. "Professor Morrison, surely you must be joking. Those tiny, mindless pests from your dirt world. Do you really have nothing more impressive to share with us?" More laughter followed. Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he forced himself to stand straight and maintain eye contact with his audience. "I understand your skepticism," he said calmly, "but I invite all of you to keep an open mind. I think you'll find that these simple creatures have capabilities that might surprise you." The Corthan student grinned, showing teeth like broken stone. "Very well, human. Show us what your bugs can do. This should be entertaining." Jake activated his first hologram and began his presentation, hoping that the aliens would soon discover they had greatly underestimated Earth's smallest citizens. Jake took a deep breath and activated his first hologram. A three-dimensional image of an ant appeared in the air above his head, magnified so everyone could see its details clearly. The creature was black and shiny, with 6 legs and large jaws. "This is a common worker ant from Earth," Jake said. "It weighs about 2 milligrams. That's roughly the same as a grain of sand." Several students in the audience yawned. One of them, a creature with multiple eye stalks, actually closed several of its eyes as if going to sleep. Jake smiled slightly. "Now watch what this tiny creature can do." The hologram changed to show real footage of ants working together. The students watched as a single ant picked up a piece of food that was clearly much larger and heavier than itself. The ant carried the food easily, walking in a straight line toward its nest. "This ant is carrying 50 times its own body weight," Jake explained. "If a human could do the same thing, we could pick up and carry a car over our heads while walking, normally." The gray-skinned Corthan student, whose name Jake had learned was Vextar, made a dismissive sound. "Impressive for such a weak species, perhaps. But many creatures have good strength compared to their size. My people can lift 100 times our body weight." Several other students nodded in agreement. Jake had expected this reaction. "You're absolutely right, Vextar. Many species have excellent strength ratios. But let me show you something more interesting." The hologram changed again. Now it showed the inside of a beehive, with hundreds of bees moving in what looked like organized chaos. Jake zoomed in on one bee that was doing something very strange. The bee was dancing. "This bee has just returned from finding a new source of flower nectar," Jake said. Watch her movements carefully. The bee moved in a figure-8 pattern, waggling her body and moving her wings in specific rhythms. Other bees gathered around her, touching her with their antennae and following her movements closely. She's not just dancing for fun, Jake continued. She's giving the other bees exact directions to the food source. The angle of her dance tells them which direction to fly relative to the sun. The duration of her waggle run tells them exactly how far to travel. The vibrations she makes with her wings give them information about the quality of the food. A student with 8 legs and compound eyes like a spider leaned forward. This was Krillith, one of the arachnoid species. Basic coordinate transmission, she clicked dismissively. Our larvae can perform quantum calculations while still in their eggs. Jake nodded respectfully. I'm sure they can, Krillith, but consider this. This bee learned the location of the food source just once. She flew there, memorized the exact distance and direction, evaluated the quality of the nectar, flew back home, and then translated all of that information into a dance that other bees can understand perfectly, all with a brain smaller than a pinhead. Some of the laughter in the room began to quiet down. Jake noticed that a few students were actually taking notes now. But navigation gets even more interesting, Jake said, changing the hologram again. Now the image showed a butterfly with bright orange and black wings. It was incredibly beautiful, and even the alien students seemed impressed by its colors. This is a monarch butterfly, Jake said. Every year, millions of these butterflies travel from Canada to Mexico. That's a distance of over 3,000 miles. A student from the back of the room called out. Many creatures migrate long distances, Professor Morrison. What makes this special? Jake had been hoping someone would ask that question. What makes it special is that no individual butterfly ever makes the complete journey twice. The butterflies that fly south to Mexico lay eggs and die. Their children fly partway north and lay eggs and die. Their children continue north and lay eggs and die. Only the 4th generation flies all the way back to Canada. The room was becoming quieter now. Jake could see that he had their attention. So here's the amazing part, Jake continued. That 4th generation of butterflies has never been to Mexico. Their parents have never been to Mexico. Their grandparents have never been to Mexico. But somehow, they know exactly where to go. They find the exact same trees their great-grandparents used, sometimes the very same branches. Krillith's compound eyes focused intently on the hologram. How is this possible without technological assistance? The butterflies use magnetic navigation, Jake explained. They can sense Earth's magnetic field with organs in their antennae. They also use the position of the sun and even polarized light patterns that are invisible to human eyes. All of this information is processed by their tiny brains to create perfect navigation across thousands of miles. At the back of the room, Jake noticed a human woman in military uniform watching intently. This was Lieutenant Amy Foster, who had been assigned to observe the cultural exchange. Her tactical training was clearly recognizing the military applications of such navigation abilities. Jake moved to his next demonstration. The hologram now showed a small black beetle with yellow stripes. This is a bombardier beetle, Jake said. It's about to demonstrate some very impressive chemistry. The hologram zoomed in to show the beetle's rear end, just as a threat appeared in the form of a much larger insect trying to attack it. Suddenly, a jet of boiling liquid shot out from the beetle with a loud popping sound. Several students jumped in their seats at the unexpected explosion. The bombardier beetle stores 2 completely harmless chemicals in separate chambers in its body, Jake explained. When threatened, it mixes these chemicals in a special reaction chamber. The mixture creates a boiling hot spray that reaches temperatures of over 200 degrees. The chemical reaction happens in just milliseconds. Hexoran, a member of the warrior caste militant species, leaned forward with sudden interest. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced weapons technology. The timing must be precise, Hexoran rumbled. Too slow and the predator attacks. Too fast and the creature destroys itself with its own reaction. Exactly, Jake said. The beetle has to control the mixture ratio, the reaction timing, and the direction of the spray all at once. It's performing chemical engineering that would challenge your best laboratory scientists, and it does this as a reflex action. Professor Zenthara, the crystalline Zephyrian who headed the department, began taking notes on her tablet. Her body's colors shifted to deeper blues and purples, which Jake had learned indicated deep thought among her species. But perhaps the most impressive demonstrations are still to come, Jake said, preparing his next hologram. Let me show you what happens when these simple creatures work together. The hologram changed to show what looked like a massive construction site. Thousands of small brown insects were working together, carrying building materials and constructing elaborate tunnels and chambers. These are termites, Jake said. They're building a structure that will house millions of individuals with perfect climate control, waste management, and food storage systems. The alien students stared at the complex architecture rising from the ground. The termite mound was taller than a human and full of intricate passages and chambers. The most remarkable thing about this construction, Jake continued, is that there are no blueprints, no central planning committee, and no construction supervisors. Each termite follows simple rules, but together they create architecture that rivals anything built by advanced civilizations. Vextar, who had been so dismissive earlier, was now studying the hologram intently. The structural engineering appears sound, he admitted grudgingly. But surely this is just instinct, not intelligence. Jake smiled. That's what we thought too, until we studied how they solve problems. Let me show you something that happened in our laboratory. The hologram changed to show a termite colony that had been built in a glass container for study. Researchers had introduced a problem. They had broken one of the main tunnels that the termites used to move food. The students watched as the termites discovered the break. At first, individual termites tried to cross the gap and fell down. But within hours, groups of termites began working together to build a bridge across the broken section. Watch how they solve this problem, Jake said. They're calculating load distribution, testing different materials, and adjusting their design based on what works and what doesn't. This isn't just instinct, this is engineering. The room had become completely quiet now. Even the students who had been laughing at the beginning were paying attention. At the back of the room, Lieutenant Foster was taking careful notes. Her military mind was already thinking about the applications of such problem-solving abilities. Jake looked out at his audience and saw that he finally had their respect, or at least their curiosity. The demonstrations were working better than he had hoped. And we haven't even talked about their most impressive capabilities yet, he said, preparing for the next part of his presentation. Jake could see that his audience was finally paying attention. The mocking laughter had stopped, and even the most skeptical students were leaning forward to get a better look at his holograms. But he knew the real surprises were still coming. Now, I want to show you something that will challenge your ideas about intelligence and planning, Jake said, activating a new hologram. The image showed what looked like a giant tower made of dirt and clay, rising high above the African grassland. It was easily 20 feet tall and perfectly shaped, with smooth walls and complex internal structures visible through a cutaway view. This is a termite mound, Jake explained. But it's not just a home. It's one of the most advanced climate control systems on Earth. The hologram zoomed in to show the internal structure of the mound. Dozens of tunnels and chambers were connected in a complex network that looked almost like the inside of a computer. The termites have built a perfect air conditioning system, Jake continued. Hot air rises through the center of the mound and exits at the top. Cool air enters through tunnels at the base. The whole structure creates air currents that keep the internal temperature exactly right, no matter how hot or cold it gets outside. A student with blue crystalline skin raised what appeared to be a hand. This was one of the Zephyrians, a species known for their advanced technology. Professor Morrison, are you saying these insects control temperature without any mechanical devices? That's exactly what I'm saying, Jake replied. They're using pure physics and mathematics to create perfect climate control. The angles of the tunnels, the size of the chambers, and the thickness of the walls are all calculated to create exactly the right airflow patterns. Professor Zara, the department head, had stopped taking notes and was now staring at the hologram with obvious fascination. Her crystalline body was shifting through colors that Jake had learned meant deep intellectual excitement. But wait, Jake said. There's more. These termites don't just control temperature and airflow. They also manage humidity, waste disposal, and food storage. all in a structure built entirely by creatures with brains the size of a dot. The hologram changed to show another cross-section view, this time highlighting different areas of the mound. Some chambers were filled with what looked like tiny gardens. Others contained neat piles of organic waste. Still others held stores of food in perfect preservation conditions. They've created the equivalent of a modern city, Jake explained. With residential areas, waste treatment facilities, food production zones, and climate control systems, all designed and built without blueprints, computers, or central planning. Vextar, the large Corthan student who had mocked Jake at the beginning, was now studying the hologram with the intensity of an engineer examining a new technology. The efficiency ratios are remarkable, he admitted. My people's cities require massive energy systems to maintain climate control. Jake nodded. And termites do it with no energy source except the heat from their own bodies and the sun. But Jake wasn't finished. He activated another hologram, this one showing a different type of insect colony. Now let me show you the leafcutter ants of South America, he said. The new image showed streams of ants marching through a jungle, each one carrying a piece of green leaf over its head like a tiny umbrella. The sight was almost comical, and a few students chuckled. You might think these ants are just gathering food, Jake said, but you'd be wrong. The hologram followed the ants back to their underground nest, where Jake showed what happened to the leaves. The ants weren't eating them. Instead, they were chewing them into a pulp and spreading the pulp in special underground chambers. The leafcutter ants don't eat leaves, Jake explained. They're farmers? The students looked confused. Jake zoomed in on the chewed leaf pulp to show tiny white growths covering its surface. They use the leaves to grow fungus gardens, he continued. The fungus is their actual food source, but this isn't simple farming. The ants have created a complex agricultural system. The hologram showed different chambers in the ant colony. Some were filled with fresh leaf pulp where new fungus was growing. Others contained mature fungus ready for harvest. Still others held composted waste that was being recycled as fertilizer. They practice crop rotation, Jake said. They manage soil nutrients. They even have pest control systems to protect their crops from diseases and harmful insects. A student from the logical codex species stood up. This was Krisha, whose people were known for their powerful analytical minds and advanced computing systems. Professor Morrison, Krisha said in a voice like clicking metal. These behaviors you describe are simply evolved instincts. The insects follow genetic programming, nothing more. They are not truly intelligent. My people's biocomputers can process information at quantum speeds. Jake had been expecting this challenge. He smiled and nodded respectfully to Krisha. I'm glad you brought up processing power and intelligence, Krisha. That's an excellent point. Let me show you something that might change your mind about insect intelligence. The hologram changed to show a beehive, but this time Jake focused on a very specific behavior. Dozens of bees were flying in and out of the hive, but some of them were doing something unusual. They were visiting multiple locations around the area, spending time at each one, then returning to the hive to perform different dances. This colony needs to find a new place to build their home, Jake explained. Their current hive is overcrowded, so they're house hunting. The students watched as scout bees explored hollow trees, abandoned buildings, and other potential nesting sites. Each scout would examine a location carefully, measuring its size, checking for problems, and evaluating how suitable it would be. Now, watch what happens when the scouts return, Jake said. Back at the hive, different scouts began performing different dances. Some dances were very enthusiastic, with lots of vigorous movement. Others were more subdued. The bees watching these dances would sometimes follow one scout to check out her recommended site, then return and perform their own dances. What you're seeing is a democratic decision-making process, Jake explained. Each scout is essentially giving a presentation about why her chosen site is the best. The other bees are evaluating these presentations and voting with their actions. Krisha's metallic features showed what might have been surprise. Are you suggesting these insects hold elections? In a way, yes, Jake replied, but it's more sophisticated than most elections. The bees don't just vote once. They continue debating and re-evaluating until they reach a consensus, and the final decision is always mathematically optimal. The hologram showed the end result of the bee democracy. After several hours of dancing, debate, and site visits, all the bees had agreed on a single location. Jake displayed a computer analysis of all the sites the bees had considered. Human scientists tested this process, he said. They analyzed every potential nesting site using computer models that measured factors like size, protection from weather, distance from food sources, and safety from predators. The site chosen by the bees was always the mathematically best choice. But here's the most remarkable part, Jake continued. The bees are solving what computer scientists call optimization problems. These are mathematical challenges that require enormous processing power. Some of our most advanced computers struggle with these types of calculations. The room was completely silent now. Even the students who had seemed bored earlier were paying full attention. The algorithms these bee colonies use to make decisions would be recognized by your quantum computers, Jake said, looking directly at Krisha. Except the bees are doing it with biological neural networks that weigh less than a grain of rice. At the back of the room, Dr. Ben Carter, Jake's colleague who was monitoring the presentation from Earth via quantum relay, watched the alien students' body language change completely. Their dismissive postures had transformed into focused attention and obvious respect. Lieutenant Amy Foster was taking detailed notes, her military training recognizing the strategic implications of decision-making systems that could outperform advanced computers using minimal resources. Jake looked out at his audience and realized he had achieved something remarkable. These beings who represented the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were now looking at Earth's insects with genuine amazement. And we still haven't reached the most impressive demonstrations, Jake said, preparing to reveal capabilities that would challenge everything the aliens thought they knew about intelligence and engineering. The students waited in silence, no longer skeptical, but eager to see what other surprises Earth's simple creatures might reveal. Jake looked around the lecture hall at the faces of his alien audience. Where there had once been laughter and dismissive comments, now there was complete attention. Even the most advanced species in the galaxy were beginning to understand that Earth's insects were far more remarkable than they had imagined. "I've saved the most impressive demonstration for last," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "What I'm about to show you will challenge everything you think you know about engineering and construction." The hologram changed to show a vast African landscape during the rainy season. Rivers were flooding, and the ground was turning into muddy marshes. In the middle of this chaos, a dark mass was moving across the terrain like a living river. "These are driver ants," Jake explained as the image zoomed in. "Also called army ants. There are over 20 million individuals in this single colony." The students could now see that the dark mass was made up of countless individual ants, all moving together in perfect coordination. The sight was impressive, but several students had seen large swarms before on their own worlds. But then something extraordinary happened in the hologram. The front of the ant colony reached a wide stream that was too deep and fast-flowing for the ants to cross. The entire colony stopped moving. "Watch carefully," Jake said. "You're about to see biological engineering that will amaze your best architects." What happened next made several students gasp out loud. The ants at the front of the colony began linking their bodies together, grasping each other with their legs and jaws. More ants joined them, and then more, until they formed a living bridge stretching across the rushing water. "They're building a bridge out of their own bodies," Jake explained. "But this isn't random. Watch how they organize the structure." The hologram slowed down to show the process in detail. Larger, stronger ants positioned themselves at key stress points where the bridge would bear the most weight. Smaller ants filled in the gaps between them. Some ants hung underneath the bridge structure to provide additional support. "They're performing structural engineering calculations in real time," Jake continued. "They're calculating load distribution, stress points, and weight limits, all without blueprints, computers, or training." Morax, a student from the hive-minded collective species, leaned forward with intense interest. His people were famous throughout the galaxy for their ability to work together as a perfect unit. But even they had never seen anything like this. "How do they know where to position themselves?" Morax asked. "How do they coordinate such complex construction without central planning?" That's the remarkable part, Jake replied. Each ant follows simple rules based on local information. If there's too much weight in one area, ants move to relieve the pressure. If there's a gap in the structure, ants move to fill it. But together, these simple individual actions create sophisticated engineering solutions. The hologram continued to show the bridge in action. Once it was complete, the rest of the colony began marching across. The bridge ants held their positions perfectly, supporting the weight of millions of their sisters without breaking or collapsing. But watch what happens when conditions change, Jake said. In the hologram, the wind picked up, causing the bridge to sway. Immediately, the ants began adjusting their positions. Some moved to provide additional stability. Others changed their grip patterns to better handle the new stresses. They're adapting to changing conditions in real time, Jake explained. Like a smart building that responds to earthquakes or strong winds. Except this building is made entirely of living creatures. Professor. Zara had stopped taking notes entirely. Her crystalline body was now cycling through rapid color changes that Jake recognized as the Zephyrian equivalent of amazement. But Jake wasn't finished. The hologram changed to show another driver ant scenario. This time, the colony had encountered a different problem. They needed to cross a large body of water during flood season. When driver ants encounter deep water, they build rafts, Jake said. The students watched in fascination as thousands of ants linked their bodies together to form a floating platform. Ants on the bottom of the raft trapped air bubbles in their bodies to provide buoyancy. Ants on top formed a waterproof layer to keep the colony dry. The raft automatically adjusts its shape based on water conditions, Jake explained. If waves threaten to break over one side, ants move to raise that edge. If the current pushes them off course, they reshape the raft to compensate. Vextar, the Corthan student who had mocked Jake's presentation at the beginning, was now studying the hologram with the intense focus of a military engineer. The logistics are incredible, he admitted. How do they coordinate millions of individuals without communication systems? They do have communication systems, Jake replied. But they're not like anything your technology uses. The hologram zoomed in to show individual ants on the raft. Jake highlighted chemical trails that were invisible to most alien vision systems. They communicate through chemical signals, touch, and even vibrations, Jake explained. An ant that detects a problem releases specific chemicals that tell nearby ants exactly what kind of help is needed. These messages spread through the colony faster than most electronic communication systems. But here's what makes this truly remarkable, Jake continued, changing the hologram once more. Every behavior I've shown you tonight is being performed by creatures whose individual brains are smaller than the period at the end of a sentence. The new hologram showed a magnified view of an ant's brain compared to the processing chips used by various alien species. The ant brain was incredibly tiny in comparison. Each ant has fewer neurons than the simplest computer chip, Jake said. Yet when they work together, they solve engineering problems that would challenge your most advanced construction teams. Captain Lisa Chang, the human military attaché who had been quietly observing from the side of the room, exchanged a meaningful look with Lieutenant Foster. Both of them understood the strategic implications of what Jake was revealing. If humanity could learn from these creatures, the applications would be extraordinary. The mathematical principles these ants use to build bridges and rafts are the same ones your architects use to design buildings and spacecraft, Jake continued. Except the ants evolved these capabilities millions of years ago, and they implement them with biological systems that are self-repairing, self-organizing, and incredibly efficient. Krisha, the logical codex species student who had challenged Jake earlier, stood up again. But this time, her metallic voice held respect rather than dismissal. Professor Morrison, she said, are you suggesting that these insects have solved engineering problems that our civilizations required advanced technology to achieve? Jake nodded. I'm suggesting exactly that. But more than that, I'm suggesting that they've found solutions that are in many ways superior to your technological approaches. He changed the hologram to show a comparison between alien construction methods and ant engineering. While alien buildings required massive machinery, complex materials, and enormous energy sources. The ants accomplished similar results using only their own bodies and simple coordination rules. Your buildings require constant maintenance, external power sources, and can be damaged by natural disasters, Jake said. Ant constructions are self-maintaining, require no external energy, and automatically adapt to changing conditions. The room was completely silent. Jake could see that he had fundamentally changed how these advanced beings viewed Earth's creatures. And this brings me to my final point, Jake said, preparing for his ultimate revelation. Everything I've shown you tonight represents what insects can do on their own, but humanity has been learning from them, and what we've discovered by working with these creatures will change how you think about Earth's place in the galaxy. The alien students waited, with eager anticipation, no longer the dismissive audience that had greeted Jake at the beginning of his presentation. They had witnessed capabilities that their own advanced civilizations had never achieved, all demonstrated by creatures they had initially considered worthless pests. Jake smiled as he prepared to show them how humanity had begun to harness the power of insect intelligence, and why Earth was about to become much more important in galactic affairs than anyone had imagined. Jake looked out at his transformed audience and felt a surge of pride. The same alien students who had mocked him for studying bugs were now hanging on his every word. But he had one final surprise that would change everything they thought. They knew about Earth and humanity. For the past hour, I've shown you what insects can do, Jake said. Now I want to show you what happens when humans learn from them. The hologram changed to display images of human technology that looked surprisingly similar to the insect behaviors Jake had just demonstrated. There were construction robots working together to build bridges, tiny flying machines moving in perfect swarms, and agricultural systems that seemed to copy in farming methods. My colleague Dr. Alex Turner at our Defense Research Center has been working on something remarkable, Jake announced. Captain Chang has given me permission to share some of this research with you today. Captain Lisa Chang nodded from her position at the side of the room. She had been authorized to reveal certain non-classified developments that could help establish Earth's credibility among the galactic community. The hologram now showed a swarm of tiny flying machines, each no bigger than a bee. They moved through the air with the same coordinated precision that Jake had shown in his insect demonstrations. These micro-drones use algorithms copied directly from bee colonies, Jake explained. They can work together to map unknown territories, search for survivors in disaster areas, and even build structures cooperatively. Vextar leaned forward, his forearms crossed as he studied the mechanical swarm. The coordination patterns are identical to the insects you showed us earlier. Exactly, Jake replied. We studied how bees make group decisions and copied their methods. These drones can solve complex problems as a team, even when individual units are damaged or destroyed. The hologram switched to show the drones in action during what appeared to be a rescue operation. They were searching through the rubble of a collapsed building, working together to move debris and locate trapped people. Traditional rescue operations can take days or weeks, Jake said. These drone swarms can search an entire disaster area in hours, using the same coordination methods that driver ants use to build their bridges. Several students were now taking rapid notes. The applications were obvious to anyone with an engineering background, but Jake had an even more impressive demonstration ready. The hologram changed to show a construction site where something extraordinary was happening. Hundreds of small robots were working together to build a large structure, but they weren't following any visible blueprints or central control system. Watch how they solve construction problems, Jake said as the hologram showed one of the robots encountering a damaged support beam. Instead of stopping work, nearby robots immediately began adapting their construction to work around the problem. Just like the ants building bridges, each robot follows simple rules, but the group creates complex solutions, Jake explained. If one robot breaks down, the others automatically adjust their work to compensate. If the building design needs to change, they adapt without needing new programming. Professor Zenthara's crystalline form was now glowing with bright, excited colors. Professor Morrison, are you saying your robots can solve engineering problems without central planning? That's exactly what I'm saying, Jake replied. And it gets better. The hologram now showed the completed building that the robots had constructed. It was a complex structure with multiple levels, perfect climate control and efficient use of space that rivaled the termite mounds Jake had shown earlier. The building was completed in 3 days, Jake said. Traditional construction methods would have taken 3 months, and the robots used 30% less material than conventional techniques, while creating a structure that's stronger and more efficient. HFY, the warrior species student, raised one of his massive hands. What about military applications? Captain Chang stepped forward slightly, indicating that this was her area of expertise. Jake nodded to her. Our defense applications are classified, Chang said diplomatically. But I can tell you that insect-inspired coordination systems are revolutionizing how we think about logistics, communication, and problem-solving in challenging environments. Jake resumed control of the presentation. But construction and rescue operations are just the beginning. We're developing defensive systems based on bombardier beetle chemistry, navigation networks inspired by butterfly migration, and communication protocols that copy bee dances. The hologram showed a series of rapid images, chemical defense systems that could neutralize threats with the same precision as bombardier beetles, navigation systems that worked without satellites by copying butterfly, magnetic sensing and communication networks that remained functional even when most components were destroyed. What you dismissed as primitive pests have become the foundation for our most advanced technologies, Jake said, his voice carrying new confidence. We're not just studying these creatures, we're learning to think like them. Krisha stood up, once again, but now her metallic voice held wonder rather than skepticism. Professor Morrison, are you suggesting that human technology is advancing by copying biological systems? I'm suggesting something more than that, Jake replied. I'm suggesting that Earth's insects have already solved problems that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations are still struggling with. And now that humanity is learning from them, we're beginning to understand that sometimes the most sophisticated intelligence comes in the smallest packages. The room was completely silent as the implications of Jake's words sank in. These alien students represented species that had conquered space travel, built galactic civilizations, and developed technologies beyond human imagination. Yet they had never thought to learn from creatures as small as insects. Morax, the hive mind species student, spoke slowly. On my world, we pride ourselves on perfect coordination between individuals. But these insects achieve similar results with no central control at all. And that's the key insight, Jake said. Intelligence doesn't always require big brains or advanced computers. Sometimes the best solutions come from simple rules followed by many small individuals working together. Professor Zenthara rose from her seat, her crystalline body shimmering with what Jake had learned was the Zephyrian expression of deep respect. Professor Morrison, she said formally, I believe this academy owes you an apology. We have learned something profound today. Perhaps we should discuss establishing a formal exchange program to study these remarkable creatures more extensively. As the alien students began filing out of the lecture hall, many of them stopped to ask Jake detailed questions about specific insects and their capabilities. Vextar wanted to know more about ant construction techniques. Krilleth was fascinated by bee mathematics. Even the skeptical Krisha was asking about biological computing systems. Zara approached Jake with a huge smile. Professor, I don't think they'll ever underestimate Earth again. Jake watched as Vextar discussed ant architecture with HFY, while Krilleth and Krisha debated the computational power of insect colonies. The same students who had mocked him were now treating Earth's insects as worthy of serious scientific study. Captain Chung joined them, her expression serious but satisfied. Dr. Morrison, I think you've just accomplished something significant for human-alien relations. When these students return to their homeworlds and start wondering what other primitive things Earth has taught us, they're going to approach humanity with considerably more respect. Lieutenant Foster approached from the back of the room, her tactical notebook filled with observations. Professor, the strategic implications of what you've revealed today are enormous. If other species start trying to copy our insect-inspired technologies, Earth's position in galactic affairs could change dramatically. Jake looked out through the lecture hall's massive windows at the alien city beyond. Its inhabitants, had no idea that their understanding of intelligence, technology, and the potential of small things had just been fundamentally challenged by Earth's most overlooked citizens. "You know what the best part is?" Jake said to his human colleagues. "We've barely scratched the surface. There are millions of insect species on Earth, and we've only just begun to understand what they can teach us." As the last alien students left the hall, still deep in discussion about the remarkable capabilities they had witnessed, Jake realized that he had done more than give a successful presentation. He had opened the galaxy's eyes to the incredible intelligence that existed in Earth's smallest creatures. The age of humanity being dismissed as inhabitants of a dirt world was over. From now on, when galactic civilizations looked at Earth, they would wonder what other amazing secrets the small blue planet might be hiding.